Hi, welcome to the second part of Introduction to Cell Scripting. I am Jyoti Prakash Mishra, and I hope you have watched the first part. The link to the first part of this video can be found in the description of this video. Let's begin. You probably have a shell by now. You're probably using Linux or Mac or the Windows subsystem for Linux or Cygwin or something like that, and you have a shell in front of you right now. It is better to work out the examples while I'm explaining them to you so that you can get the required practice to get yourself properly introduced to cell scripting. As I said, if you have not watched the part one of this video, please do so. Or I'm assuming that you have a basic understanding of some elementary shell commands, know command substitution, and can do expression evaluation. We will learn about some more commands like sort, tr, bc, and test. And in the subsequent slides, I'm going to go into details about all of these commands. We will learn how to combine multiple commands. We will see how we can execute one command, and only if that is successful, will it go and execute the second command. Or if it is not successful, it can also go and execute the second command. So we will see how we can AND those two commands or those two commands. It's really convenient. And we will see what subshells are. We will learn about how to write conditions. We will learn about if, then, else if, else, and the way to end the if structure is to use fi, which is the reverse of if. And we will also learn switch cases. We will look at how to write for loops. We will look at the bash syntax, and we will also look at the C-like syntax for writing for loops. We will look at while and until loops also. We will see how to write functions in bash. We will learn how to create arrays and how to add more elements, loop over the elements of the arrays and stuff like that. And then we will end it up with some examples. So using the sort command, you can sort lines of text files. For example, I have a file called to be sorted, and these are the contents of the file. I have the names of some famous personalities, some number, we could assume them to be the pin code of wherever they used to stay. These are not the real pin code. So just for example, I've taken these numbers, and these are the cities where they were either born or they used to stay, right? So if I just say sort to be sorted, it is going to sort the lines of this text file by looking at the first characters of those lines, right? You can see that A.R. Rahman is there at the top 2 times because we have 2 entries for A.R. Rahman. And this is not going to modify the file in any way, shape or form. It is just going to print out the output. If you want to store it back into a file, then you can redirect the output to another file. If you don't want to see duplicates, you can use -u. And as you can see, the duplicate line for A.R. Rahman is now gone. And here is another file that is to be sorted _1, and it has 3 more entries. If you want to combine the lines from 2 different files and also remove the duplicates at the same time, then you can give the file names of both the files, and you can give the -u option. As you can see, it has combined this and given us the output after removing the duplicate lines. You can also reverse sort anything by giving the -r option. As we know, -u can be used for removing duplicates, and you can sort it by another column, right? Here only the first column was being used, rather the first character of the first column was being used for sorting. If you give -k2, now the second column is going to be looked at. As you can see, it has reverse sorted the list by looking at the second names, which is basically the second column here. So Mother Teresa is the first one because T is supposed to come at the end. But since we have the -r flag, we have reverse sorted the list going by the second names because -k2 has been given. If you want to sort by a numerical column, as we have here as the zip codes, so you could go sort -u for removing the duplicates, -nk3. The n says that it's a numerical column, and you just give the name of the file. And you can see that it has sorted it by 1, 3, and then 1, 5, so on and so forth. And it has sorted all the lines by looking at the third column, which happens to be a numerical column. That's why we have gone -nk3 over here. I have another example over here, to be sorted _2. And here the separator for the different fields is the comma, not the space. So I'm just going to show it using a pipe. So if I do a cat to be sorted to and pipe it to the sort command, and if I use the minus t space comma, this is how I'm going to tell the sort command that space by default is not going to be the separator, rather the comma is going to be the delimiter for the lines. And if I say minus u, it is going to remove the duplicates. And if I say minus k1, it is going to look at the first column for sorting, which it does by default. You could say minus k2 or minus nk3 or minus k4 for sorting by those columns if you want. And as you can see, it has actually regarded the comma as the delimiter, and it has sorted the lines by looking at the first column. You can see AR has come at the beginning and Z or Z has come at the end. The TR command can be used to translate or delete characters. And I'm going to show it to you by using echo and piping it to TR, because TR does not take files. So here I am echoing my number is this, and when I do TR minus D is used for deleting characters. And over here I have told TR that only digits are supposed to be deleted. And as you can see that the digits are gone here. If I put a minus C, that just complements it. That means whatever is there between quotes, those things are not going to be deleted. So as you can see, everything else is deleted, the digits are not deleted, and the new line at the end is also not deleted. So that's why I've given a /n over here. If you don't give any D or minus CD, what will TR do? It will translate whatever is given on the left side to whatever is given on the right side. So here it has taken all the lowercase characters and translated them to uppercase characters. As you can see, my number is, all of that is in uppercase over here. And here the reverse has happened. All the uppercase letters have been changed to lowercase letters. So M was the only uppercase letter, and that has been changed to small m over here. So I'm echoing this thing, and I have put lots of spaces over here. What the minus S flag will do will squeeze this part. It will just remove all the occurrences of spaces over here. So it is going to take a space and convert that to a space, but the minus S will make sure that multiple occurrences of the space are squeezed. So you can see that a space remains as a space because we want a space to be converted to a space, but the rest of the spaces have been squeezed to just one space over here. So you can also specify the ranges small a to small z or capital A to capital Z using these kinds of symbols instead of writing upper or lower. As you can see, if I do TR minus D, A to Z, capital A to Z, it's going to delete all the letters like the alphabets, right? And those are gone over here. The spaces and the numbers and the period has remained. And you can also translate by using this kind of notation. Instead of using lower or upper, you can say convert all small case A to Z to capital case A to Z, and that is exactly what it has done over here. BC, the best calculator, is a very cool command. BC does not take a file. So if you just type BC and enter, it will take you into an interactive shell, and you can type your commands and play around with it. But for the scope of this video, I'm going to only use echo to show you how BC works. If you don't give BC the minus L option, it is only going to do integer arithmetic, as you can see over here. If you give it minus L, then it is going to give you floating point division, as you can see here, but it gives you a lot of zeros and really long fractional part of the result, and you can control that by giving it scale. If you give scale equal to 3, it is only going to print 3 decimals after the point. And over here you can see with the same scale I'm given an expression, and it has given me the result to only 3 decimal points. Now let's look at the test command. It is a real command that can be used to evaluate conditions. As you can see, if I say test2 equal to 2, it is not going to output anything, but as we have seen before in the first video, if you do echo $, it is going to give us the exit status of the previous command. And if it is 0, it is a success. And if it is anything but a 0, it is a failure, right? So as you can see, 0, that means test is telling us that this is true. So please keep that in mind. Don't think that 0 is false. No, 0 here is true and a 1 here is false. If I say test space 2 space minus eq space 3. Is 2 equal to 3? No. That's why we get a 1 over here. You can test if a file exists by using the -f flag. And you can say, I really have a file called leap.sh for the leap year calculation that you will see later. And it says, yeah, there is a file. It is true. But I don't have any file which is named nleap, and it says false. There is no such file. There is a shortcut which is really, really handy while you're using the test command with if statements and other places inside bash scripts. And the shortcut is to use a square bracket. If you use a square bracket, the shell is going to understand that you are trying to use the test command. Keep in mind, this is not an internal notation of bash. This symbol has been hard linked to the test commands. So whenever you use the square bracket over here, it means that you're trying to do a test. It is very important. That is why to give a space after the square bracket. If you don't give it a space, then bash will not understand that you're trying to use the test command. So all the commands you see on the right over here are the exact same commands on the left that we have already run over here. And as you can see, test2 minus eq2 can be written as this. And you have to give the spaces accordingly. And so on and so forth over here. And here you can also check if this file exists or not by just using the bracket notation. For strings, you have to use other operators. The -eq and the -ne for not equal to, and the rest we will see in the next slide. They're used for numerical operands. If you have strings, then you have to use operators like these, and we will also look at the rest of the operators in the next slide. I'm comparing two strings here. They're equal, so we get true. These are not equal, we're getting a false. And these are not equal, so we're getting a true. And similarly, we have done the same thing using the shortcut notation using brackets over here. So here are some of the tests. We already saw the -f file tells us that if the file exists or not. -d can tell us if the directory that you've given is actually a directory that exists. This is going to be true if the length of the string is 0. This is going to be true. This or just you put the string if the length of the string is non-zero. This is for equality of strings. This is for checking if the strings are not equal. This is going to tell you if this string is lexicographically smaller than this string. And this will tell you if this string is lexicographically bigger than this string. You can use these to compare if the two strings come in a certain order as if they would appear in a dictionary. For numerical arguments, if arg1 is one numerical argument and arg2 is another numerical argument, you can put these operators in between. And these are -eq for equal, -ne for not equal, -lt for less than, -le for less than equal to, -gt for greater than, or -ge for greater than equal to. And you can only apply them on integers. You can combine conditional expressions like this. You can put a not to negate the expression. You can put -a to do this and this. So both will have to be true for the entire thing to be true. You can put a -o to do this or this, and one of them would have to be true for this entire thing to be true. I've taken an example over here. So I've done bracket. This is basically a test command. 2 equal to 3. Is that true? No. But I've also put a -o, which is basically an or. 3 not equal to 4. This is going to be true because even if 2 is not equal to 3, but 3 is not equal to 4. So this part of the expression is true. And since we are ORing it, if one of these is true, the entire expression is going to be true. As you can see, the exit status of 0 is going to tell us that this is true. But over here we have 2 equal to 3. That is false or not. We have put a not as an example of this. -f leap. So -f leap is going to figure out if the file leap.sh is present. Is it present? Yes, it is true, but this not is going to make it false. So the right side of the OR is false and the left side of the OR is also false. Since both are false, we get a false over here, which is signified by a return value of 1 by the test command. So we'll look at ways to combine commands. So for example, if I do gcc and ls, what will this do? This will run GCC, and only if the output of GCC is a success, the exit output, only then it is going to run ls. As you can see, I have not given GCC any input files, so it is complaining that there is an error and it never ran ls for me. I can do GCC two pipes, that is the OR ls. What is this going to do? It will run this, and if this is true, it is not going to run this. But if this is false, then it has to still go and evaluate this, because it cannot decide, right, whether the OR is good. You can just think about this as an AND or like an OR, as used to do in C programming, right? So if this is false, it is still going to run ls, right? Because it cannot know until it runs ls that it is true or false. Over here, since it already knew that GCC has returned a false, it is not going to run ls, because the result of this has already been decided by the output of GCC. This is called short circuiting, as we also do in C. So here GCC returned an exit status of failure. Even then it went ahead and ran the ls, and I can see the output of ls over here, right? So let's run a test command over here. Test2 equal to 3. Is that going to give us an exit output of a success or a failure? It is going to say failure, right? Since this is a failure, 2 is not equal to 3, ls is not going to be executed, because we have two ANDs over here. But is 2 not equal to 3? Yes, that is true. And since that is true, we will have ls to also run over here, and we will get the output of ls also. Now what is this doing? This is trying to first run this 2, and then it will see whether it really needs to run the OR over here. So let's see what's happening here. So 2 equal to 3. Is 2 equal to 3? No. And that is why this ls is not going to run, and the output of this entire thing can be assumed to be false, right, as a failure. And what will OR do then? Since the left side of the OR has been evaluated to be a failure, it is going to also run the right side. And as you can see, ls minus l is also there. What is happening here? It's the same thing. I'm just doing the test command, but I'm using a shorthand, the bracket notation. So when you see this bracket here, just think of it as the test command. Is 2 equal to 3? No. So ls is not going to run, and the output of this entire AND, the combination of the commands is going to be a failure. And so the right side of the OR is going to run. And you can also see that ls minus l has run. So this is how you can use the double AND and the double pipe to combine your commands. Let's look at how to write conditions in bash. As you can see, it is just like C. I mean, it's a little different, but just look at the three structures over here and you will automatically understand how you can write if statements. You just say if, you put your test command over here. We have talked about test commands, right? And the shorthand is the square brackets. Then you go then statement, you end it with fi. You can go if this, then do this, else do this, and fi. And when I say statement 1 or statement 2, you can put multiple statements between then and else and fi, then and fi. You can put more than one statement over here, just like this. You can also do if expression, do these things, else if, that is elif, put another condition, and if this is true, then do this, else you do this, right? This is basically the last else. So it is going to check for this expression. If it is true, it is going to run this. Then it is going to check this expression. If it is true, it is going to do this. If none of this is true, it is going to do this over here. And here is an example. I have two strings, A, which has ABC, B, which has XYZ. And I'm just trying to see if they're equal by using the test command. As you can see, we have used the shortcut notation of the test command, which is the open square bracket. Make sure that you have a space after that, and before that, I have $A equal to $B. That is not an assignment. It is just going to compare if the strings are equal. And in this case, the strings are not equal. And here I have another if condition where I'm trying to see if $A is not equal to $B. And since they are not equal, this is what is going to be printed. Here is another example using numbers. I have two numbers, A and B, both are equal. And since I'm going to treat them not as strings but as integers, I have to use the -EQ flag. You can also call it an operator or whatever, but these are just flags for the test command. This might look like an expression, but internally bash is just using the open bracket as a test command, and we have looked at the test command before. And I'm just comparing the two numbers, and since they're equal, this is what is going to be printed. The else is not going to run. So I'm going to introduce you to subshells. And what are subshells? So in the previous slide, this is a very simple condition. What if you want to write more complicated conditions, as you'd need to write if you were to decide if a year is a leap year? So what is a leap year? It should be divisible by 4. It should not be divisible by 100. But if it is divisible by 400, then it is a leap year, right? So for example, 2000 is divisible by 4. It is divisible by 100, right? But that is not going to not make it a leap year, because since it is divisible by 400, it is a leap year. But what about 1900? It is divisible by 4. It is also divisible by 100. So it is not a leap year because it is not divisible by 400. What about 1600? It is divisible by 4. It is divisible by 100. So because it is divisible by 100, you'd think, oh, it is divisible by 100, so it is not a leap year. But it is also divisible by 400. That makes it a leap year, right? What about 1700? That is not a leap year. Divisible by 4, but divisible by 100. That just cuts it. It takes the leap character from the year, and 400 is not there to help it. So 1700 is not a leap year. What about 1704? That is a leap year. It is divisible by 4. It is not divisible by 100. So we don't need the help of 400 to save if 100 has taken away the leap character, right? This is something that you should know. And if you don't know, now you know what a leap year is. But writing this can be difficult, right? So let's see what we have done here. We have entered a year. We have just read it into the year variable, and just try to see what I have done. I have put 2 parentheses over here, right? The round brackets, if you want to call them. And what would these parentheses do? These parentheses would start a subshell. They will start another process, and whatever command has been given inside that, that command is going to run inside that subshell. And we will get a success or a failure, right? A true or a false from that sub process. So let's see what is happening inside this subshell. So inside this subshell, I have the first thing that you can see here is a test command. So I put a square bracket. There is no need to put a space before this, but you have to put a space after this. So I have started a test command, and here I am trying to check if the year is divisible by 4. So I have just used Bash's internal arithmetic notation, dollar bracket bracket dollar year percentage 4, and this is going to give me a 0 if the year is divisible by 4. If this is true, and this is not an and as in the logic sense, this is just combining 2 commands. This is one test command, this is another test command, and we have just put an and in the middle so that these 2 commands are combined, as we have seen before. This might look like a C kind of a thing, but internally no such C kind of a thing is happening. So we have started a subshell. We have 2 test commands that are combined by the AND combiner over here. So what is that going to do? It is going to run this test command. If this is false, then it is not going to run this test command. But if this is true, then it is also going to run this to see if this is also true. So let's just say the number is divisible by 4. So this test command is going to be true. So this test command is also going to run, and this is trying to check if the number is not equal to 0, as in this number percentage 100 is not equal to 0. That means the number is not divisible by 100. Okay, so both of them are true. Then the subshell, which is basically bounded by the round brackets over here, is returning a true to us. Then what is this OR going to do? The OR combiner, it is not going to run the right side. Basically, the number is divisible by 4 and it is not divisible by 100. That is enough to make it a leap year. We don't need the help of the divisible by 400 condition to make it a leap year anymore. But if it is divisible by 4, then it is going to run this, but it turns out it is also divisible by 100. So then this test command here is going to become false. So this subshell, the result of this subshell is going to be false, right? So what is this OR going to do? Since the left side has become false, it is actually going to run this to check if the year is divisible by 400. So for years like 2000, 1600, or maybe 2400, this is going to save the day, because this is going to give us true. And because this is true, the result of the entire command is going to be true, because this OR is going to be true, because the left side is false but the right side is true. So the answer is going to be true. So if we'll think that this condition is true, and then it will say it is a leap year. But for years like 1700, what is going to happen? It is divisible by 4, true. So this will also run. Is it divisible by 100? Yes. So this is going to be false. All right. So the left side is false. So the right side is going to run. But is 1700 divisible by 400? No. So even the right side of the OR is false. So false or false is false. So it is going to print not a leap year. I'd recommend you look at this for a while and try to understand what the subshell is going to do. The subshell is going to execute the command inside that, and that is basically combination of two test commands. And outside the subshell, we have a OR, and then we have another test command over here. And if you understand what a leap year really is, you will be able to figure out what is actually going on over here. Here you can see another example of what is going on. And I have run it directly on the shell. It is not a script. As you can see, I have started a subshell over here. Inside the subshell, there are two test commands, right? The shortcuts of the test commands, just like here. Is 2 equal to 3? No. So this side of the OR is going to run, right? Because that is how OR works. If this was true, then this would not run. But since this is false, this is going to run. And is 3 equal to 3? True. So the overall result of this subshell is true. And if this is true, then this is going to return true. But outside we have AND. Since the left side of the AND is true, then it is also going to run the right side. So LS is actually getting run, and we are getting the output of LS over here. In this slide, I'm going to show you what arithmetic conditions are. These are very, very C-like. As in the previous slide, you could see that writing something for a leap year which just uses number can get a little complicated. Though you have to still use the test command notation for strings. And if you want to check if a file or a directory exists or everything else that the test command supports, you can do man test to figure out what the test command can do for you. But if you're only dealing with numbers, then you can use the C-like syntax that you can see over here. As you can see, the condition over here is surrounded by two round brackets, parentheses, right? What this tells if is that whatever you find inside is just the internal basis way of running conditions. And to do that, you have to begin your condition with two parentheses and you have to end it with two parentheses. And you write your condition inside just like you would write it in the C programming language, right? So the percentage is the modulus, the equals is for checking equality, the AND is just going to do the logical AND, this is going to do the logical OR. You can put extra parentheses inside to group your AND, right? Previously we did a subshell to do this AND, but here this extra bracket here and here that you see is just going to make sure that this AND runs first and the result is ORed with this. So by putting those extra parentheses and by grouping this and then taking the result and ORing it with this, it is easier to read what is going on, right? You can always be clever and omit those parentheses, well, not the outer ones. The outer ones are needed to convey to bash that we're going to use the C-like conditions and not the test command. But if you use the other parentheses that I've used inside, it is very clear what I'm trying to do. And if you're trying to use integers, then you can use the C-like way of writing conditions, and which is perfectly fine for determining if a year is a leap year or not. And bracket 0 is false, just like in C it would be false, and in bracket 1 is true. In C that would be true. For the test command, however, if it returns a 0, that is true, and if the test command returns a 1, that is false. It is turned upside down that way. We will see what switch cases are. So you can have a case something in something, then you can have patterns, and you can have statements, and you have to end them with 2 semicolons. Just like in C you have a break statement, you think of the 2 semicolons as the break statement. Then you put the reverse of case, which is ESAC, to end the case. Let's look at an example. So here I have vehicle, which is BMW. I say case vehicle in, we have the cases over here. We have case 1. This is a comment basically. So don't think there's a statement or anything. You can just remove these comments. Anything that begins with a hash and bash is basically a comment. And case vehicle in Mercedes. And if that is true, we echo this and we end it. We could put more than one statements here, but at the end you have to make sure that you put the 2 semicolons to end the case. If it is Audi, then you print this. And if it is Enfield, for Royal Enfield, you print this. Since ours is BMW, it is not going to print anything out of here. But if vehicle was, let's just say Enfield, it would have printed this. Let's look at our favorite loops, for loops. And I have 3 different examples over here. And learning for loops is the best if you just look at lots of examples, because you need a lot of practice to basically internalize how to use for loops, but it is really easy. Just look at this. We have for variable in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until n, and we have a do, and we end it with done, and we can do a bunch of things inside. For example, if I say for I in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I is going to be 1, it will run it once, and then it will be 2, it will run it once, right? And then if you just run this, you will see welcome 1 times, welcome 2 times, and all the way up to welcome 5 times in different lines. You can do the same thing by this syntax. This is just going to make I go from 1 to 5, and you will get the same result. If your bash version is more than 4, then it might also support this syntax, in which it will begin with 0, right? It will go up to 10, but it will increment I by 2. So I is going to be 0, then it is going to be 2, then it is going to be 4, so on and so forth, 8 and then 10, right? It is never going to be 1 or 3, right? So the increments can also be given, and this will only work if your bash version is 4 or more than that. I'd encourage you to run this and see for yourself how this works. And luckily, there is a C way of writing for loops. You can use the double parentheses, just like always, and you can put the 3 expressions, the initializer, the condition, and the step. And here is an example, right? For C equal to 1, C less than equal to 5, C++, right? This is just like how you would write it in C, and this is going to print welcome 1 times up to welcome 5 times. And this is how you would write an infinite loop. And if you run this, just press Ctrl C to stop it. And I just wanted to show you how continue and break work. If you have done a little bit of C programming, you know that if you want to break out of a loop, you just use break, right? If you don't want to execute all the iterations of a loop, and let's just say you are done with whatever you wanted, you can just come out of the loop by saying break. And if you don't want to execute the rest of the loop, and you just want to go to the beginning and go to the next iteration, you can do continue, right? So let's look at some examples over here. Here I is going to go from 1 to 5. And here I have a condition which says if I is an even number, right? This is basically what the test command over here is doing. Then you continue. That means if I is an even number, you go to the next number. Otherwise you print $I is odd. What is this going to print? 1 is odd, 3 is odd, 5 is odd. For 2, this if is going to be true, then it is going to continue to 3. For 4, it is going to continue to 5. It will not go to the else or anything after that. If there were also other echo commands or whatever, after this fi, it would not run any of that. From continue, it is straightway going to go to the next I in the list. Over here, I have a condition. I is going to go from 1 to 9 over here. And if $I ever becomes equal to 7, then break, right? So that means for 8 and 9, this loop is not going to run. Even for 7, this is not going to run. So this loop is basically going to do effectively whatever it is going to do from 1 to 6, because once I becomes 7, we are going to break out of the loop and come out of the loop. Nothing is going to execute after that. So I can never be 8 or 9. And since we are breaking out of here, even this part for 7 is also not going to run. And this is the same thing that I had here. So if it is an even number, you don't do anything, you continue to the next one. Otherwise you print, if something is odd, you print that it is odd. So you'll print 1 is odd, 3 is odd, 5 is odd. For 6, it will just continue to 7 because it is even. And for 7, this will be true and it will break out of it. In this slide, we will learn about while loops. They're also very, very easy. We just have while, we just put a condition over here, and if that is true, it will run these things and it will keep doing that till this condition is true. For an example, you see that x is equal to 1 over here, and while we have put a test command over here, $x is less than 5, right? You keep doing this. So you echo welcome 1 times, then we're going to increment x by 1 using the Bass's internal way of doing arithmetic. And then x is still less than 5. Now x is 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it is also going to run for 5. 5 is less than equal to 5. It is not LT. It is LE. That means less than equal to. When x becomes 6, it is not less than equal to 5 anymore. And then this will not run anymore. And this is a very simple way to figure out the factorial of a number. So you have the counter as $1. And the factorial as 1. What is this going to do? Till the counter is greater than 0, you just multiply the counter with the factorial and you reduce the counter. Well, over here the counter is $1. What does that mean? It is going to be the first command line parameter. So if you just run this command and give 5, it is going to give you 5 factorial, right? We learned before that $0 is the command name and $1 is the first command line parameter. You can look at the first video to figure that out. We will look at another kind of loop, that is the until loop. And if in English, if you say until this, do this, what would that mean? Till this condition has not become true, you keep doing this. This is the complete opposite of while. While says that while this is true, you keep doing this. Until says that until this is false, you keep doing this. But the moment the condition becomes true, you stop doing it. That's the only difference. Let's see how to write functions in Bash. So to write a function, you just give a function name, put 2 brackets. You don't take parameters over here. The 2 brackets over here just tell us that this is a function. You start the curly brace, you write your commands, and you end your curly brace. For example, here is a hello world function. So it's a function which just echoes something, and to call it, we just write hello world, and the function is going to be called, and you will see hello world. Here is another example. This function says echo some result, and then it returns 55, right? And you call the function, and just like we have seen in the first video, the $? holds the exit value of the previous command. So for functions, the return value of functions are also stored in $? So if you do echo $? after calling the function, you will get 55 because that is what the function has returned. Let's look at some scoping, right? Here outside we have 2 variables and the values are a and b. We have defined our function and we have defined a local variable, variable 1. So this variable, variable 1 is not the same one as this. This is local to this function, whereas variable 2, if you don't put the local, it is going to just use the same variable outside. So here, when you do local variable 1 equal to c, the outside variable is not going to be changed. But if you do var2 equal to d without local, the outside variable, variable 2, which was b, will now become d. So inside the function, when you print this, it is going to print var1, and that is going to be the local variable. You will see c, and var2 it is going to be the outside variable which has been changed to d, and you will see a d over here. So before running the function, you'd get variable 1 as a and variable 2 as b. Inside the function, you will get variable 1 as the local variable, so you will see c, and variable 2 is going to modify the global version, which is the outside variable, to d from b. So you will see inside function variable 1 as c and variable 2 as d. And after the function has executed, variable 1, which is the outside variable, will have remained untouched because the variable 1 inside the function was its own local copy. So you will see variable 1 as a, but the function has actually modified variable 2 from b to d. So you will see a and d for variable 1 and variable 2 respectively. This is yet another way to return something from a function. So inside the function, we have a variable called funcResult. So when you call the function, you can do echo funcResult to get its result, and it's going to print some result. This is yet another way to get something out of a function. So here we have local funcResult. So if we have local funcResult, this variable is not going to be visible outside, and we put a value of some result inside that, and we just echo it. So when you call this function, what is it going to do? It is going to print some result, right? But if you do command substitution outside, so when you call the function, you can think of this function call as a command. And we know what command substitution does. It just calls the command, gets the output of the command, and gives it to either echo or whatever variable is there on the left side. So here funcResult is not the same variable as the local funcResult, because the local funcResult is local to this function, and that has some result, and the last line of the function is just echoing it out. Outside we are doing command substitution on the function, and so instead of echoing it to the command line, we are just substituting that inside the string, and that is going inside funcResult. And then when you do echo $funcResult, then this variable is going to be referenced, not the one inside, because that is local to the function, and you will see some result here. So there are three ways to return something. Either you return something directly and you do echo $, and you will get the value, or you just use a global variable, right? Because there's not local, you put something outside that is available, or you just use something that is local or do whatever and you echo it, and you do command substitution outside to get its result. And let's look at how to pass parameters to functions. Just like command line arguments, even functions can receive their parameters using $1, $2, so on and so forth. $0 is the name of the function, just like $0 used to be the name of the command. Inside a function, $0 is the name of the function, $1 is the first parameter, so on and so forth. The $has variable, just like bash, it holds the number of arguments, and $ampersand holds all the arguments together. So if you're inside a function, then $0, $1, so on and so forth, and $hash and $at, these variables will give you the values that should be applicable inside the function. They're not going to give you the values that the command got. Right, in the first video, we saw that $0 used to be the name of the command. So if it is inside a function, then $0 is not going to be the name of the command. It is going to be the name of the function. $1 is not going to be the first command line argument to the command that was used to run it on the shell. No, it is going to be the first parameter that was passed to the function, right? Let's see an example. So here I have a function greeting, and I've done echo hello $1, and I just call the function, and you don't put any brackets. Just like in C, you used to put brackets and then used to give the parameters or arguments to the functions. No, here you just put a space and you give the first parameter, then you put a space, then you give the second one. So Joe is going to be $1, right? $0 is going to be just greeting, that is the name of the function. $1 is inside the function, so it is not going to be the first command line argument given to the entire script. It is going to be Joe here. So it is going to print hello Joe to you. Let's look at arrays now. Arrays are very simple to use, though the notation can be a little bit confusing. So I'd recommend you really practice these notations, but they were a little strange to me when I first began using them. But if you do a little bit of practice, it is not going to be that difficult. Arrays in Bash can hold both numbers and strings or whatever. So as you can see, my array is an array which has 1, 2, 3 as a string, 4 as a number, 5 as a string again. So to create an empty array, you can do this. To initialize an array, you can do something like this. If you want to retrieve, let's just say the third element, then you can use a notation like this. If you want to retrieve all the elements, you can use this, and this is useful for loops. You can basically iterate over all the elements of an array. And here you might ask, why is the third element 2 over here? Because the first element is 0, the second element is 1, and the third element is 2. What is this going to do? If you put this exclamation at the front of this, it is going to give you the array indices. It is not going to give you the elements, it is going to give you the indices. So for example, if your array is this, right? Retrieve all the elements. This notation is going to give you 1, 2, 3. But the indices are 0, 1, 2, right? So this is going to give you 0, 1, 2. What are the indices over here? No matter whatever is there in the array, the first index is going to be 0, the second index is going to be 1, and the last index is going to be the length of the array minus 1. So the retrieve array indices is going to give you those numbers. This is going to give you the length of the array. You can do this to overwrite the first element, right? And you can put some other number apart from 0 to overwrite other elements. If you want to append something to the end of the array, you can use this notation. This is going to add 4 to the end here. So the array will become 1, 2, 3, 4 now. This is an example where we just do a simple command substitution. So ls will be run, whatever is the output of the ls, that string will be stored in str. But if you want to store the output of ls as an array of files, right, then you can use this notation. So now ARR is an array whose first element is going to be the name of the first file, the second element is going to be the name of the second file, so on and so forth. If you want to get a part, a slice of the array and not the entire array, then you can just extend this notation. This used to give us all the elements, whereas this is going to give us the elements starting from S, and n is the number of elements from the start. So if you put s as 0 and n as 1, it is going to only give you the first element. If you put s as 1, that means the start is the second element, right? Because the position 0 is the first element, position 1 is the second element. So if s is 1, it will start from the second element. And if I give n equal to 2, it is going to give me 2 elements. So if s is 1, so we start at the second element, we need 2 elements. So second and third are the 2 elements that you are going to get. So here are some examples. So we have my array. I have 1 to 5 inside that. I've taken a sum of 0 and I've just run a for loop over here for num in. So as I said before, this is going to give me all the elements of the array, right? This is basically this notation over here. And I'm going to add it to sum one by one using the Bash's internal arithmetic notation. And in the end, I can print the sum. But here I'm not going over all the elements of the array. Rather, I'm going over the indices because I have the exclamation mark over here. So here num is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All the indices of the array, not the actual elements of the array. So how do I get the individual numbers? Well, I have to dereference them from the array. And how do we dereference something from the array? We basically use this notation, right? If you put 2, you're going to get the third element, right? Since we know the indices, we can just go $myArray $num. Here num is going to be 0, so that is going to give us the first element. Then num is going to be 1, it is going to give us the second element. When num becomes 4, it is going to give us the fifth element. We will keep on adding it to sum, and it is also going to give us the same result. And this is the last thing that I want to discuss before I jump on to explain some examples before ending this video. So if str is a string, then this notation is going to give you the length of the string, and this notation is going to give you a substring. A substring that begins at position, and num is the number of characters in the substring. And the first character of the string is always at position 0. In C, it used to be like that too. Well, C did not have strings, but C used to have character arrays for strings, and the first element used to be index number 0, right? It's the same way here. So position 0 is the first element. So if I want the first character only, then I will put pos as 0 and num as 1. That will give me only one character because num is 1 and the position is 0. If I want the second and the third character, I'm going to put the position as 1 because that is the beginning, that is the second character, and I need two characters, second and third, so num is going to be 2. That is how I'll get a substring. And the notation here is going to give me the length of a string. Now let's end this video after looking at some important examples. So we have already looked at this example where I explained to you how to figure out if a year is a leap year or not. And here we are using the C syntax for conditions and we are not using the test commands. So this program that I have written here can be used to figure out all the prime numbers from 2 to 100. So before you look at this loop, please take a look at the function that I've written here. This function will take a parameter and it will tell us if it's a prime number or not. So I've taken a variable divisible as 0. I'm running a C-like loop from 2 to the number divided by 2 and I'm incrementing the counter. This is exactly what you would do in the C language, and the way to figure out if a number is prime or not is to begin from 2 and go till the number by 2. If you find any number that can divide the original number, then the number is a composite number. If none of these numbers can divide that number, then that number is a prime number, right? So we go from 2 to that number divided by 2, and $1 is going to be the first parameter passed to this function, right? And if $1 percentage $i, what is $i? $i is basically the loop variable over here. And here we are trying to see if any of these numbers from 2 to that number divided by 2 can divide the number passed to the function, right? So if the remainder is 0, that means the number is actually divisible by one of these numbers, and this is a composite number. It is not a prime number. Then we break out of this. We don't need to check for any of the rest of the numbers. For example, the number is 40, then the number is straightway divisible by 2. Then why check it from 3 to 20 anymore? There is no need to do that, right? But if the number is 19, which is a prime number, then any number from 2 to 19 divided by 2, basically 9, none of them will be able to divide 19, right? So we can keep going that way. So divisible becomes 1 and we break. Otherwise we keep going, right? If the loop ends and this is never satisfied, then the divisible will still remain at 0. So if divisible equal to 0, that means it is a prime number. Then I'm returning 0, right? If the number passed to is a prime number, I'm returning 0. Otherwise, at the end, I'm returning 1. That means if this is false, that means divisible is equal to 1. That means it is a composite number. And in that case, I'm returning 1, right? Outside, I'm running a loop using this syntax from 2 to 100. This is not the C syntax, this is the bash syntax. And I'm just calling the function is prime and passing on the num over here as a parameter. And this is basically a combination of two commands. So there is a test command over here, and then if this is true, it will execute this. If this is false, it is not going to execute this. So what is $question mark? $question mark is going to be the return value of this function. And if the return value of this function is 0, that means it is a prime number. That is how this function has been written. And if this is true, then this will also execute the right side, right? And it will say the number is prime. If this is false, it is not going to execute the right side. That is how the AND operator over here works, right? We have also seen this before. In this program, I'm trying to figure out if a string that has been input is a palindrome or not. So I have taken a string over here. Here I have the length of the string using this syntax. I am running a loop that starts at len minus 1, right? Because I have to reverse the string, so I have to take the character at the end and I have to go till I is greater than equal to 0 and minus minus I, right? This is a C syntax for writing the for loop, and I have taken a variable called rev, which is for reverse, and I have just concatenated the strings, right? Initially rev will have nothing, but this will give me the last character, right? It is going to take the input string, it is going to take the position, and when I is len minus 1, that basically is the last position. I can read one character there, and rev is going to be, for the first iteration of the loop, the last character of the string. Next time, it is going to take the second to last character and then it is going to concatenate that to rev. And this is how you can reverse the string. If the strings are equal, then you echo palindrome, or else you say not a palindrome. And this if thing can also be done like this, right? You can just, and this will not execute because I put them in comments, but we can run a test command. If this is true, then of course the right side of the AND is going to execute. It will say palindrome. But if this is false, then this will not run and the output of this AND is going to be false. What will this OR do? Since the left side is false, it is going to execute the right side, right? And say not a palindrome. This is the last program. This will read a bunch of numbers from the command line and then it will give you the average, the floating point average. Well, the numbers that you take, those are going to be integers, right? But the average could be a floating point number. So we're going to use BC to do that. So here I have initialized an array, right, using the empty initializer that we have seen before, and I've used the until loop. So until the input becomes done, we are going to keep running this. I'm going to say enter a number, type done if you are done. I'm going to read it. I'm going to use the array append syntax to keep adding the input to the array. And if anytime input becomes done, it is not going to run this anymore. I've taken the length of the array as the real length of the array minus 1 because the last entry of the array is going to be done, right? Because we are reading it, we are putting it in the array, and then we are checking it, right? So we are taking the length as the length of the array minus 1. And I'm going to run a for loop for all the elements of the array. And the average can be, so I'm just going to do a command substitution over here and echo scale equal to 3. I don't want a long answer from BC. And I'm going to pass the sum divided by the length. And this string is going to be piped to BC. And that will be stored in the average variable, which I am printing over here. So you might be wondering, hey Jyoti, you just took the length as the real length of the array minus 1 because the last element is done. But when you are adding the numbers, you are considering all the elements of the array. Well, sure, the last element is done, but when you do integer arithmetic like this, any strings will be considered as 0. So even if you're going to add the sum to done, it's not going to add anything to the sum. So it's all right. So thank you for staying with me. I hope you found this video useful. I will probably make a third part of this video in which we will discuss even more advanced concepts of Bash programming. So please subscribe to my channel to get updates on that. Thank you.